Hi everyone, it's a real honour to be invited tonight. This is another first for me. I'd never spoke on TV or to news before, but I think maybe it'd be better off if Sarah goes first and explains a bit of the strategy of choosing your wording and stuff. I'm just a gob.
Thanks very much, Tracy. Actually, I don't know if any of you have seen Tracy's interviews she's done, like her interviews on YouTube. So I would really recommend, before you send your spokes out into doing any studios, to have a look at some of those videos, because I imagine that what you are going to get presented with is going to be very, very similar. And I imagine the arguments that are going to get put to you are going to be very, very similar. And your trick, and Tracy did it really well in one of the videos, in one of the interviews, the trick is to move it away from discussing the disruption. And in one of them, I think it was Dan Wootton, Tracy said to him 3 times, she said, "Are you scared or stupid?" Like, I mean, Tracy, the courage of doing that, but to put it to them, are you scared because you're not looking at this, or are you stupid? So but there's lots of different ways in doing that, and you can see some of the different techniques that we tried to use to actually move it away from the disruption. And that is going to be your main problem in terms of media. Everyone is going to want to discuss what you've done, the tactics you're using. Are you, are these actions actually turning people against your cause? We all know that climate change is happening, the government's acting, we all know we need to act, you don't need to do this anymore, you're turning people against your cause, it's not as bad as that, and you're just disrupting ordinary people. Why aren't you disrupting the politicians, the people who are doing this to us? So those are the main points that I imagine, those are the main points that happen to us. And I imagine, I don't know the Czech media so well, but from the American and Australian media, I imagine that that's the kind of pushback that you're going to have to deal with. So that put aside, the response from the media, in terms of the messaging strategy, we had, and when this messaging strategy was first explained to me, because I joined the Insulate Britain campaign couple of weeks before we actually started the actions. So I was quite a newbie. I hadn't been involved in a lot of the planning. So I came into a media team which had a brief, it had its framing, it had its messaging, and it had the beginnings of the first set of press releases that were going to go out. And in terms of an environmental movement, the messaging that we were using was very, very different from anything else that I had worked with. So I'd done spokes with XR before. I'd done some stuff in the media messaging in the central bit of the UK XR, and I'd also been on the Extinction Rebellion political circle. So I'd, some understanding of kind of like radical messaging within the environmental group. I'd also been a councillor, an elected councillor for 8 years on the local, 15 years actually on the local councils. So I understood about talking, I thought about talking to people about the environment. Insulate Britain took a totally different tact. So, and we referred to it as post-green messaging. And so we basically stayed away from the environmental issues. We spoke very, very little about the environmental issues. Of course, we referenced it, and we tended to reference it by using a single quote. And we quoted a former chief scientist of the United Kingdom who said that, in his opinion, the next 3 to 4 years would determine the future of humanity. And so we used that quote to encompass the unraveling of the climate, and also, in a way, the unraveling of ecology as well. So we did not go into huge swathes of detail about the science. We used a number of other quotes as well, but we pretty much kept coming back to Sir David King. And here I would say, although the spokes got really fed up of it, And I think the journalists did as well. Here, repetition is your friend. You've got a message you want to get across. This is the next 3 to 4 years. So we just kept hammering that particular quote. So we stayed away from the numbers, we stayed away from the science, but we didn't stay away from the narrative. We did talk about a narrative of what was going to happen. What did we? I can't remember. We said it was a fight over a tin of baked beans in Morrison's, which is a local supermarket. You know, that's the kind of future we were looking at. But in our call to action of the government and of journalists and the media, we used the language of the right rather than the language of the left. So although the framing was around Insulate Britain, was around helping very vulnerable people, we actually started using that language of the right. So we were talking about protection, we were talking about defence, we were talking about security, we were talking about the nation state and protecting the nation state. And in the UK, this is not things that people on the left tend to talk about or language that they ever tend to use, because the left tends to be much more internationalist. So we did talk about that the government needed to take action to protect the families of Great Britain, for example. And that did prove quite difficult for some commentators on the left and for some environmentalists, and for quite a long time they were really quite sniffy about us. We didn't get the same level of attacks that Extinction Rebellion got from the left in the UK, and ultimately the left did actually pretty much start coming on board with Insulate Britain's demands, because ultimately, and as the phrasing that we used, it was a no-brainer. So we used a lot of that kind of colloquial language. We used, it's a no-brainer. We called on the government to get on with the job. So we use that kind of phrasing. And quite often, if we were looking at putting a press release out or a comment piece in the newspaper, I'd be sitting there saying, we've got to IB this up a bit. You know, we've just gone too cerebral, we've gone too intellectual, we've gone too green, we've gone too left. And so we'd think about our national newspapers like the Sun and the Daily Mail. If they were running this story, what kind of language would they be using if, you know, they suddenly came over onto our side? But how would they be communicating it? And we tried to use that kind of language. So we were conscious that we were using the language and the framing of the right, although the messaging we were putting across was the messaging of needing to take action to reduce emissions. And we were quite strict on the control of that framing and the messaging. So we had a document which we referred to as the Bible, and we would go back and look at it. And we had the messaging and the framing in there and the reasoning for that messaging and that framing. And so although we were using what you might call like relatively simple language, we were also positioning ourselves as the grown-ups in the room. So we were the people who were prepared to face up to what needed to be done, not what we wanted to do or what we wanted to happen, but we were the people who were prepared to face the realities of what was happening and what needed to be done. There was also the feeling that we were also grounded in moral certainty, that we knew that this was the right thing to do. And that because of that, we were grounded in confidence, so that we were confident about what we were saying. So we were morally certain, we were confident, we were the grown-ups in the room, but we were also using that language of protection, of defence, rather than talking about, for example, fairness or equity, or we never mentioned, we were not, and we did not use the words environment, we didn't use environment, we didn't use ecology, we tried to stay away from climate change. So we avoided all of those words that people tend to use when they're communicating about the climate crisis. And we also tried, although not always successfully, but we also tried to have like a response to the framing that newspapers and commentators were using. Well, one moment, I've just got a daughter sticking her head around my door. Sorry. Someone help me, where have I got to? Oh yeah, the rapid response. So one of the things that happens is like you gain what you think the responses are going to be, and someone comes up with something new, or something happens, like someone walks onto the motorway when you're not expecting it, or the Home Secretary makes a reference, who's a British politician, to insulate Britain. And how are you going to respond? You know that your spokes are going to get asked about that when they go into interviews. And so we had a rapid response document where we would try and think, right, they're going to ask about that. What's the response in the IB language and framing? And so we'd write that up. So that was there for the spokespeople or the people who were doing comment pieces or answering the press phone. We had a press number, and we had a rota of people who would answer the press phone as well, so that there was always somebody who could answer the press phone, and it didn't fall on one person. And we had the press email box, which had like a number of people had the logins to reference that, and a series of tabs as well to say if we'd answered emails or not. And then, you know, we had the various lines that we came up with. So, for example, when the government was talking about prosecuting us, about imprisoning us, and we had those lines like, we are more scared of climate chaos than we are of our government. So we had a number of those lines that we would just, you know, we just rinsed them just over and over and over again. So it's having that messaging nailed down. It's ensuring that your spokes and the people doing the press understand and feel that moral certainty and that moral confidence, and using that hive mind as well. The other thing is, if you want to send a press release out or a piece out, make sure at least one other person checks it. So everything gets checked once, because it's so easy to see what you want to say as opposed to what you think you've written. And I'm going to hand over to Tracy now with the spokes, but we had a series of ongoing rolling trainings for our spokes. So at one point it was every day at 11 o'clock, and then it ran down to 3 times a week. So people who were doing spokes could turn up at those meetings and run through the lines that we were going to respond to the latest comments and way that we were being framed in the press. And so that, you know, that was those people were so dedicated doing and holding that, and they worked really hard. So Tracy, over to you in the studio.
Thanks, it's lovely to not be being called a terrorist. And we started those practices before the campaign started. We practiced, yeah, how we were going to speak, because it did feel very uncomfortable. So, and I'm still nervous. I'm just going to have a go doing it. Yeah, so yeah, I can't believe it. You know, how did I end up on national morning telly saying stop sending spaceships into rockets shaped like dicks? That bit was not practiced. I was tired. So my mum's, yeah, still rather upset, although she liked it a bit up till that point. But yeah, it's really hard, and practice and talking amongst yourselves, I can't say how important that's been to me, because it's emotionally battering and it's hard, you know. It was hard not being in action all the time and speaking on behalf of people. You know, this is, oh, I'm waffling. So anyway, what we've realised is, and what we thought before, was it's really important to not think about getting an interview as a chance to become popular. If you want to be on TikTok or you want a career in media, this is not the way to start that, right? You're not going to be popular. There's a lot of hate going to come your way. Poor Liam, I think, took the most of it in our team. There will be some love as well. But this isn't about being popular. We have to think of these like actions. You know, there are plenty of people who've gone before me for decades who are way more intelligent, much better, no matter how I practice. You know, these spaces are just not set up, especially in the UK, to have a reasoned debate. It is an attack. It is an attack to hold the truth they want. And it's the same that I see in Parliament here as well at the moment. You know, they're not going into these spaces to have reasoned debates. People are setting up their arguments against each other. So it is a battleground. And many of them, I came out feeling like I'd been in a physical fight. For me, this started in October 19. I heard that an emergency had been declared, and I couldn't believe my government had declared an emergency, and I heard nothing. And it fills me to this day with desperation to understand that if I hadn't got ill, if I hadn't lost my job, if I hadn't seen that quick clip, I may well still not know what is going on. So I try to hold in my heart that these people out there who won't do what I need them to, they're not bad. It's not that they don't care. Everything about our system, our society is set up for us to not understand this stuff. You know, it sounds like a conspiracy, but it's not. There are people with vested interests in keeping their narrative in everybody's minds, you know, and they use simple language and they repeat themselves all the time. And there's been a conflict of, you know, gosh, what are we doing? But this is where we're at, right? And the truth is too important, and we have to try to be louder than that. And we know that we're bringing love to this. You know, I'm not get Brexit done to do people over. I'm, you know, the fuel poverty, heating or eating, because I truly care about this stuff. And, you know, as much as I wish the world was different, we have to accept the reality of where we're at and what we're going to do. This next bit might sound a bit hippie, but since October 19, the only way I can describe it with my Catholic upbringing, not practicing anymore, is I felt a calling that I just had to tell this truth however I could. And I set up my Facebook. I'd never really used it before, just to try and talk to people. And I found myself there. So it's a bit hippie, but there really has been and needs to be an element of we are in service, you know, to something greater and to each other. You in Australia and Croatia, wherever we are, we're all part of this sticky network together. You know, we're mobilizing people everywhere. So try to remove your egos, try to be critical, and, you know, eye up your competition. What's the spokes that you've got the best shot of going in there with? You know, soften them up with one spoke, learn from them and get a hook and go at them with the next spokes. You know, I can't say how much I didn't like the media before, and watching how it works has been really, really tough. So we need to be practical. We need to think of this as a job that we are in service to, best person for the job at the time, lots and lots of practice, because it was so hard to ask. It was Richard Madley. I said to him, are you scared or you're heartless? Are you scared or you're heartless? Are you scared or you're heartless or you're stupid, right? I mean, it's incredible. And I actually practiced that on a motorway bridge with Roger and Liam, shouting. We were all practicing shouting and being, you know, disobedient in answering, because we're all quite trained, you know. It's very uncomfortable to not ask a question, even if you know you're going to do a pivot. And it was surreal. A few of them tried to come at me with that even. Oh, well, it's clear you're playing a game, or, you know, you've learned tactics. And the bloody cheek of them, right? like they're not sat there using these tactics against us. So yeah, like Sarah said, what was really helpful was we tried, before we went into action, we tried very hard to think what kind of questions, and we got them down to about 5. This was before, I can't remember, but it was like, you know, we all hear, why don't you go to China? You obviously don't believe in democracy. So coming up with your own responses to that and getting in a group and practicing it and daring yourselves to be a bit cheeky. You know, our bar kind of became, is that the truth? And does it make you feel uncomfortable? Then that's where we need to go, right? Because the uncomfortable truth, the truth is ugly. So yeah, lots and lots of practice. And like Sarah said, as the campaign goes on, if you read the crappy mags, I think I've got apps and stuff on my phone, I never would, I'm in groups. If you've got a really thick skin, look at the comments. That's where I got some of my best comebacks, were from listening to myself get hated. But I do have a thick skin. If you don't, you're sensitive, don't look at them, right? So work out what your skills are within the team, who can do what, and try to put your best person in the best place. If you make mistakes, don't worry, right? I would say It took about 3 or 4 weeks of being steadfast, going again, getting nothing but hate, and then we felt a bit of a change. But it was things that we couldn't really anticipate. So I'd say it was the girl who drove the car at us that shifted public sympathy a bit. And we did see, you know, like just when the Freedom Riders went out, the Ku Klux Klan, their membership rose first. Ugly, hateful people find it much easier to put their head above the parapet first. You know, there's lots of big, deep breaths, holding each other, and moving forward is probably going to happen. And then Concrete Gate, you know, you can grow concrete. We honestly, after that little that little interview a bit, were like, that was a waste of time. And that was our best bet. I made the mistake of saying rocket shaped like dicks on TV, but but the next day they ran a segment called "Is the Space Race a Disgrace?" So, you know, as long as you're treating this like an action, you've practiced, you're going in there with the best of intentions, you're going to come out after everyone and wish you'd done better, know that you blew something. I said environment, you know, or give yourself a break, because this really is emotional, tough stuff. Yeah, so these are actions, and I'm glad that I went on the road a couple of times, but we had hoped at the beginning that we could do action spokes. It's tough. I think I've had to accept that doing both is just not possible, and that comes with you know, difficult feelings, but it really is emotional. We practiced every day during the campaign, you know, looking out for what was getting said, what are your responses going to be, getting in a room with your friends, trying them out, seeing if you can keep a straight face for some of them, nick off of each other. You know, plagiarism is your friend. Oh, it was really important in interviews to repeat myself. So you want 3 times. So 3 to 4 years, do you know what that means? With a slight difference next time. 3 to 4 years before my kids face an unimaginable future. 3 to 4 years before, you know, so we do need to repeat ourselves. You don't know who's listening, where they're coming from, and sociology, you know, whatever it is, it takes about 3 for it to go in. Yeah, think about your socials. If you're going to put yourself out there, there's an element of who knows what. I've been very lucky. I haven't been doorstepped or anything like that. I have had quite a bit of hate. People are reporting me. Like I said, I've got thick skin, so I'm not very bothered. There are steps you can take beforehand. If that's more of an issue to you, do them. And my last point would be, have to take questions. I'm not sure I spoke much sense. It's never lose your sense of humour. Right? Never lose your sense of humour. And yeah, just do your best to support each other through this. And if you want to reach out during your campaign, yeah, we're here to help. Sarah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, Tracy, that thing about are you feeling uncomfortable? Like, if you send in a press release out, if we sent a press release out and went, oh, that's okay, we probably hadn't got the tone right. So every single press release we sent out, we were going, oh, we're really poking the tiger with this one. You know, we're stealing your clothes and we're telling you we're not going to stop. It was like, whoa, okay. So it was like that, finding that space where you're feeling uncomfortable, where you're letting go of, you know, where you are being transgressive. You know, you are taking it, you are crossing over that accepted social boundary, and you are now, you are being transgressive. And we also accepted with Insulate Britain that, I mean, and it's had some very serious consequences, this campaign, for people. Like, there's 10 people in prison at the moment, hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of court costs that we're seeking to raise. So I'm not making light of this at all, but we accepted that it was experimental. Like, we were experimenting with the messaging and with the level of the actions, and so it was experimental. And so then within that, we were able to take risks in ways that we haven't done with other campaigns. And we utterly accepted. There's a football club in the United Kingdom called Millwall, and on the terraces, Millwall always sing, everyone hates us and we don't care. Well, basically, we accepted that we were going to be the Millwall of the environmental movement. That was it. Everyone hated us, and we just kept going and going and going. So it was a really interesting position to be in. especially for someone who, like, you know, who's been seeking election beforehand, to just go, we don't care, you're all going to hate us, we don't care, we're right, we're absolutely morally certain about this needs to be done and you need to know about it. So yeah, experimental, transgressive, and that even if it was performative confidence. And also, I just wanted to add one last thing and then I'll stop, is that the people who are doing the spokes stuff, they need to be supported and that level of care that you give to people who are also doing the actions, because it is so hard. The emotional toll of being in that space is huge. So those people need to be looked after, and you need something in place to do it. We don't think we always got that right, actually, Tracy, and that's certainly one of the learnings that we've taken away from our debriefs. So
I was hugely loved and looked after. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I think that's fantastic. So we're just going to open it up to people who have questions for Tracy and Brent. Did you have one?
Yeah, actually I do. I found from the M&M team really interesting when you're talking about the language and the kind of the language of the right and the colloquial language. I'm just wondering did you adjust that at all depending upon the kind of political spectrum of the media that you were talking to, or you just went straight forward with that kind of right colloquial language for even the liberal and supposedly left media?
So we did adjust it a bit. So, you know, we've got newspapers here like The Guardian and The Independent. I mean, in some ways, the questions that they're putting to you and the angle they're coming to you at your responses will be will respond to that. So for example, the Daily Mail or the Telegraph, if they ever got in touch with us, we knew that this was going to be a hostile piece that they were doing. If the Guardian got in touch with us, we knew that we had a chance of a more balanced piece, and if some of the more liberal internet broadcasters got in touch, then it's like some of them were actually on side. So yes, we did change, we did tweak the messaging, but we only tweaked it. Like even with The Guardian, we were talking about the families of Britain, and we were talking about protecting the nation state, and we were saying things like which you just don't say in the left in the UK. We were saying I love my country, we love our country, and we are seeking to protect it. It's like the left just does not say that. You know, the environmental movement, you might love the countryside, you might love ecology, you know, but you do not love your country. So to say things like that was felt very transgressive, and it felt really odd. But we were using that messaging with the newspapers on the left as well. But it was tweaked. I think that's fair to say. And some of them would just do it more in depth as well, because they were more interested.
Yeah, that's made me think of something similar to that. Do your research if you're going into to talk to somebody. Do your research on the interviewer. If you can get a little hook, that's great. For example, one that I was talking to, he was the first MP able to run as an openly gay man. So that was my hook with him. How can you be complaining about protest when this is you? So I talked to everybody the same anyway. I didn't do the press releases, but yeah, I strongly recommend having a look into who you're going to talk to and how they hold their interview style. I wasn't as aggressive with everybody as I was with Dan Wood. Yeah.
I think if you're being invited onto a panel show and there's other panelists on there, like Tracy said, also not just do your research on the interviewer, but also your research on who the other panelists are. So if you're accepting an invitation, always ask who the other people are likely to be on the show, who the other speakers are. And also we also controlled like how they referred to people. So we're not activists, we're not protesters. This is about so much more than a cause. You know, this is about how my children are going to eat in the future. So, you know, this is about a bloodbath in the local aisle of Morrison's. So it's not a cause. We're not activists. We're not environmentalists. You know, and we tended to refer to ourselves as supporters of Insulate Britain. Like, so that's what we called ourselves.
Yeah. So I think Michael, if that's how it's pronounced, has a question, and then Janet has a question. Go ahead.
Yes, I got two questions. And the first one is, how long time did it take to you in order for people to accept to use this language framework? Because I imagine many people come from XR and maybe they had resistances. So, like I'm from Italy now, and we are trying to use the language from Insulate Britain. We are the ones that are blocking motor release in Italy now. But yes, we are in a middle language because a lot of people from XR don't really accept to go in full with this kind of framework that I would like to put in the fucking project we've started. And so we are always talking about, no, this is too much, this is too much. So how long time did it take to you in order to convince them? Because it's hard. And second question is, when you send out a press release, because maybe you had an action, also in the press release, you use that kind of language, because when we send out press release are very like, we have done this objective kind of press release. And so, yes, those are the questions. Thank you.
Yeah, you can answer that, and then I can go to Jenna and then Andy.
Okay. So we set ourselves up as totally separate from Extinction Rebellion. So we were a totally separate campaign. So lots of people came over from, lots of people who took part in Insulate Britain were from Extinction Rebellion, not entirely. But because we were completely separate, it meant the media and messaging could do their own media and messaging and their own framing. So it was Insulate Britain's framing. So we didn't have to have the agreement of anybody else to do it. And the media and messaging team were totally on board. And so we controlled the press releases, and we were, you know, answering the phone to journalists and their queries and stuff, and we were organizing.
Can I make my question more precise, because maybe I was not clear? Yes, I understand that you are completely different, but even the people that enter into the communication team of Insulate Britain, they didn't have any problem with the framework. You didn't have any long discussion. It didn't take time to have an agreement. They were all okay, let's go with the nationalist framework. Or you had a long time because there was maybe someone that was a good guy, I really wanted to help, but he had many inner resistances with the kind of language.
Okay, so yes, we did have continuing conversations around, should we say that, you know, is that right? There was an ongoing fear amongst some people that we would actively cause the rise of nationalism and proto-fascism in the United Kingdom if we start talking about, you know, protecting the nation state. That it was somehow anti-refugee. That's always that's a big issue here on the left, that if you talk about defending the country, and also the name Insulate Britain is like, so we got called out that it was anti-refugee, for example, but we just remained resolute in, you know, actually the most racist thing you can do is carry on emitting carbon, because, you know, it basically climate change equals racism, right? So we were just absolutely certain about that. And I think the people who were driving, holding the media and messaging team got the messaging, absolutely. There's a book by, what's it called on framing? George... There's Don't Think of an Elephant. Is that what it's called? Don't Think of an Elephant. Everyone thinks of an elephant. Yeah, I can't remember what the book's called, but there's a book written on framing and use of language, and it is in English though. But I think that's very useful for people to understand that in using different types of language, what it allows them to do is communicate with different people. And whereas if you use some words, people just cannot hear them. If you use ecology in this country, nobody who votes Conservative is going to hear what you're talking about. So it's about enabling you to communicate by using a different language. And I think on that level, the people in the messaging team understood it. But you may have a bigger problem than me, because some people, we can get so stuck in terms of our ideology.
Yeah, I think someone said in the chat that it's George Lakoff is the writer.
Yes, that's it. And I'm sorry, I've forgotten your second question.
Okay.
Yeah, immediately. And the press release also. Okay.
Yes,
press release, I mean, with press release, I mean, okay, sorry.
Yeah, so all of our press releases are on the insulatebritain.com website under press, and you can look at them all. So yes, we did the stuff where we said this action happened at this time, although quite often we were actually getting our information from the press on the ground. This action happened at this time. This is what we understood is the result of it. And then we would have some paragraphs where we say Insulate Britain are taking this action too. And sometimes we just issued a statement. We didn't do a press release, we just issued a statement. So sometimes it was a statement to the Home Secretary or to Boris Johnson, or once it was a statement where we declared ourselves in civil resistance to the government, that we were no longer protesting, but we were actually engaged in civil resistance. And so sometimes we just issued a statement, which interestingly, quite a lot of that got published in the newspapers. So we did mix it up a little bit. So sometimes it was very traditional, and sometimes it was just saying what we wanted to be said when we knew that the press were listening to us or reporting us.
So yeah, I think Jana, you had a question, then we'll go to Andy.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, my name is Jana. I'm from Germany, from the last generation in Germany. No problem. I have just a little question of understanding for the last thing that was said. What's the difference between a statement and a press release? And then I'm going to ask my question. Just, do you send it out to the press or not, or what's the difference?
Okay, yeah. So a press release tends to be giving some information about something that has happened. And sometimes it can be quite factual. So it would just be like, 27 Insulate Britain activists have blocked the M25 at 8 a.m. this morning, junctions X, Y, and Z. So that would be a fairly standard press release. And then you'd say, for further information or videos and pictures, like look here. And then we'd have our demands at the bottom of it. Whereas if we were doing a statement, we might just, for example, Priti Patel said something about us, and we just issued a statement back to Priti Patel, and we sent it out to all the press, but it was basically a statement or an open letter to Priti Patel. So it wasn't a press release giving bits of information about an action.
Yes, thank you. So my question was, how did you choose the people who would talk to the press? Were they the most experienced, or did you have some characteristics in mind to choose who is going to speak mostly?
Tracy, do you want to take that?
Sorry, you're on mute.
We had a chat group set up. There was about 10 of us, maybe a bit more. It changed throughout the campaign. We started off with 3 national spokes. So we'd started practicing before the campaign together. We went in, and I think you want at least that, maybe more. And we were the ones that had done the practice. And the whole thing we were trying to do was to put a voice or a person on the TV who people are not used to seeing in them spaces. So I don't talk like posh but not middle class. Liam was like the builder, and maybe I hammed it up a bit. You know, I've never said sweetheart quite that much, but it made people lose their shit. So, so we had 3 national spokes, and then we had more to do local media, which tends to be a little bit kinder. we would look at, it started off mainly Zoe and Liam going out, and that was actually an accident. I lost my voice the first couple of days, but looking back, that's probably quite a good way to go, is to put somebody out, although it's precious, so people get used to seeing them a bit, and then bring somebody else in so that they get used to faces, because as uncomfortable as it is, it helps, right? Plagiarism, repetition, seeing the same people, it helps. But if you do a good job, you're going to get quite a lot. And locally, we found newspapers lost interest if you didn't have somebody a bit closer to them. So we also trained up other people who were actually on the road. So if press was out there while you're on an action, try to maintain discipline. You don't want people to blow your whole spoke stuff like on the road, talking about the environment and trees and things, if you've decided that that is not what you're going to say. So yeah, it's uncomfortable, isn't it? Because nobody really wants to push themselves forward. And we were very careful to, once you start releasing information or you go on a radio show, they'll start contacting you personally if they've got their details. That's, you know, let your ego, shrug that one off. They're just after something. Refer it all to the press team and make these decisions as a team. I don't know what your media site where you are, if you're doing these full-on argumentative battle zone ones, you don't want to do more than a few of them a week. So definitely share them out. You know, they're like Sarah said, they really are emotional. So yeah, get to know each other. Once you've got your framing and your messaging, decide what kind of voices, you know, you want to fit. And again, it's being transgressive. So if you can find somebody who's not normally given airspace, that's a good way to do it. But we also did have doctors and people who you may be more likely or used to hearing, and it was nice, I think, to have the mixture and depth, because it's tiring, and hopefully you'll get a lot. So I did answer that okay. So if you've got anything to add.
I think your point about the key messages, so when we hit the roads, we had 5 key messages for Insulate Britain, and that meant that the people on the roads could be briefed about those key messages. So we had a pretty strong line that the bees on the road were not to talk to the press. We just said, please don't talk to the press. Let the people who've been nominated in your block group direct the press to them. And people were really good about it, although some people took it a little far and refused to actually engage with the press at all. But what we meant was, like, don't do interviews, just, you know, direct them to the person who feels confident and capable to talk to the press. And those people were prepped with the 5 key messages, so they knew what to say. And obviously, you can lose control of the stuff on the ground, of course, and the journalists sometimes were just relentless. So they identified certain people they wanted to talk to because of how they looked or because of their backstory. So they went after them. But pretty much people just did it really well. You know, they were so disciplined, and the people on the road, that we had people prepped to talk to the press if they turned up there. So that's another useful point, so that they have the messaging and they can just repeat it. You know, it doesn't matter how much the journalist asks them. If you're on message, you just repeat the message.
Yeah, and that's made me remember, if you get a pre-record interview, don't fall for having a nice little chat. That's an even more time. Stick to your message. Just repeat yourself again and again and again, whatever you want to say, because they're going to cut a tiny bit out of it. So yeah, I was really boring. At the end of them, I just go like, I'm really sorry. But you know, it's more important we get the team message out than, you feel a bit uncomfortable, you're being a bit rude. And they will chop the bit you don't want if you don't.
Andy, you have a question?
Yeah, so like, is there a way to sort of measure the success of this approach to the narrative? Like, you know, it sort of makes sense in terms of the whole 30 years of trying X hasn't worked, let's try other stuff. Is the main advantages like the way that you can sort of stuff up the conservative media who would otherwise like just push you into a left environmentalist corner? And like, and is there ways that you've measured your success, you know, because obviously you've mobilized heaps of people just to do more radical resistance, but like, have you mobilized conservative people? Is there a way to tell? Because I guess an alternative argument is like along the Overton window, like you sort of speak. I mean, the whole thing is really transgressive anyway. So I'm not really sure if like you could really speak in a way that was also any more transgressive. But yeah, I guess just, can you measure the effectiveness, or what would you say to that?
Okay, that's such a good question. And it's, I mean, all of us engaged in this type of activity, we will never know how close we are to achieving success until the dam breaks, right? It always, you know, I grew up with the Iron Curtain, right? That was an absolute given until one morning I woke up and it had gone. It's like, whoa, who knew for those like 3 or 4 years beforehand just how weak the Iron Curtain was? You know, so it's really hard to know. It's so difficult to know. One thing that did make me stop in my tracks was Liz Truss, who is now our Foreign Secretary, she tweeted about us, and she tweeted, "Insulate Britain are not heroes." So she's right-wing politician, member of the government. She tweeted she felt the need to say that what we were doing was not heroic. So that point I went, oh, okay, so you think somebody or something we are doing appears to you to be heroic, and you feel the need to lay out that we are not. So that's my only bit of evidence I can offer you that what we were doing was in some way being seen as recognizably like moral, courageous and right, even by the right wing in the country. And because Insulate Britain was such a no-brainer, it's like, yeah, like, hang on, wait a minute, tens of thousands of people are dying because of the cold and they don't have to. It's like, oh, parents can't afford to feed their children, and it's possible that they wouldn't have, you know, they could keep them warm. It was an utter no-brainer. Nobody could argue against the cause. All they could argue about was the way that we were doing it, and even that was being seen as courageous. So, but in terms of metrics, I can't give you any metrics on that at all. It's simply not possible. You know, there were 247 newspaper articles. I don't know how many references. We made popular culture. We made and if people start making jokes about you, it means they don't hate you, right? You know, very few jokes about ISIS, the IRA, for example, in this country, but they were making jokes about us. We became part of the culture. People were dressing up as Insulate Britain protesters on
Halloween.
Yeah, thanks. And but that's because it's like, oh, they're quite nice, you know. Yeah, yeah. So we just became this cultural effect, and people could laugh about us and make fun with us rather than hate us. So those are the only references I can give you. But I've got no hard data on that. It would only be if the government, you know, went, yeah, okay, we'll start insulating every home in Britain. I could tell you that we'd succeeded, but we didn't get that far. But everyone knew who we were. We had like 70% name recognition within 2 weeks. Like, it's like unheard of if you were a marketing campaign. So yeah, that's the only success I can give you. Well, and all you guys here, of course.
I think it's really important we don't get attached to outcomes, right? We say that all the time, but it's so important in this. Like I said, what would be called our best bits, they just happened, right? On a personal note, I know that some of my friends and family who had stopped talking to me for a little while are engaging again. How do I say this nicely? I'm new to XR. I've never been political. I don't know. Well, I know I'm not right. You know, I do care about this stuff, but I didn't have the language for it because I'd never really engaged. I had the time to get on my dictionary and met wonderful people and, you know, talked. It's really not about trying to be, you know, to encourage at all the horrible aspects of our British history, but to talk about things in simple, realistic terms. And that has been a success for me. My family and friends have recognised me speaking like myself instead of trying to to share XR information, which just wasn't who I was. I love XR, right? And I'm in it. But yeah, there are people out there who genuinely don't know and just haven't been able to hear. So I don't know. Yeah, like Sarah said, we don't know. But there are lots of groups now talking about insulation. Ed Miliband, an old MP here, has set up a different campaign. And I think we can definitely say we're shaking things up in the media space. We've seen other people, maybe like George Monbiot had a very good cry. He's a very respected journalist here, and he just cried on telly. So yeah, we don't know. We don't know. Ripples, they go out, don't get attached to outcomes, but yeah, experiment.
Yeah, so I think John has a question, then Michael has another question. After that, I am mindful of time because some people are calling in and it's quite late there. So yeah, John, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say it is such a pleasure to be on this call. I followed it from the beginning in the interviews and just amazing. We're trying to replicate what you all, done. We're trying to do something similar here in DC. And there is a question about how to engage with the interviewers and anchors. And what I noticed, and I quite liked, that it was kind of adversarial right out the gate with like some of the first interviews with Liam, at least on the part of the spokes. So a question from some folks is, what's the advantage of like going in like kind of ready to fight versus trying to like engage the person like, with their heart, if that's a possibility, first?
Yeah, so this is where doing your research on who you're going to be talking with really helps, right? There are just some interviewers out there who are not going to give you a fair shot. There is nothing about their technique of interviewing or, what their platform is built on is clicks and likes, and that is based on drama. So there are plenty of spaces you'll go into where from the off, from their side, it is going to be adversarial. So practicing, you'll be surprised at your friends who are really good at pretending to be the horrible spokes. Right? One of the quietest men I knew was great at it. And that practice is really important. If you have an interviewer who is not, that way inclined, isn't just out there. I mean, you've got like Fox News and stuff, haven't you? Some of your interviewers are right, like Dan and Dickhead Richard, but other ones, there's maybe a bit more of a balance. So yeah, we always practice trying to say, hi, thanks for having me, and starting off nice. We wanted to also try and finish with, so no matter how angry it gets, to try and finish with, we're not the doomers, we're the ones who believe in people, to try and wrap it up. That's really difficult. I didn't always manage that. But yeah, there was something that kept. I did one interview that went quite nice, and honestly, it was quite nice because I was shattered. I didn't have the energy, and it was nice that went out there, and lots of my friends and other people really liked it, and they're like, "Oh, your best one yet." And I had a chat with a couple of my mates because I was very disappointed. And like I said before, if reason, debate, and just having these honest conversations was going to get us there, we wouldn't be in such a mess, is my personal opinion on all of this. So we're going in there, it's an action. Try to do something transgressive or a bit out there in everyone if you can, because sadly, that's where the clicks are. That's what makes it potentially go. And yeah, I mean, the media, it's just a cesspit, isn't it? It's just horrible. And a couple of them, I mean, Liam held his own so well with one of our worst ones that he admitted he's just scared of China, so holding their language does make it difficult for them in a way, because yeah, they're almost arguing with themselves. Sorry, I'm waffling a bit. Have you got anything to add, Sarah?
I think there's lots of people who are going on to, you know, doing interviews and broadcasts who are, you know, who are appealing to the science, who are appealing to our sense of reason to act. You know, you just about every single commentator who's talking about ecology and climate is occupying that space, and it hasn't moved anyone to act. But whereas there's something about, although I think, you know, we are the grown-ups and we are facing reality, actually, you know, if the fuckers are coming to burn your home, right, you've got a right to be furious and cross about it. Why would you not be cross? If you're not cross and you're unable to show that emotion, is it really that bad? You know, I think there is something about us acting out the truth of what we are facing, and, you know, and it is an appeal to the heart and to emotion, but it's not necessarily going to be pleasant and calm, even as we remain the adults in the room. So, hey, you know, like, John, the spaces, those broadcast spaces that you find yourselves in, they are uniquely difficult places to be. They're hostile, and we are trying to put across the most uncomfortable message. So I don't think I don't know that we've got it right, but, you know, that's what we did, and we will finesse it and work on it and take it forward, and we will also look at the stuff that you guys are doing and go, oh, bloody hell, they did that well, you know. And so, like, this is and we will steal stuff from you as well. Yeah, so we don't have to, we can do that. We can steal stuff, we can learn from each other, and we can keep experimenting and trying this stuff out.
Yeah. I think, Michael, you had another question, and after that, maybe we can do one final question and start wrapping. Go ahead.
Yeah, there is still a double question. So first is, did you have guidelines for speaking with the car drivers? So have you ever been also disrupted with car drivers, respectful but disrupted? Okay, so. And the second question is, did your style of communication has, in your opinion, an effect on the XR communication? So the theory of the radical flank is changing the bigger group, and you are the smaller group into the climate movement in the UK. So did your kind of communication change the kind of communication of XR? So maybe XR now has a more aggressive or a more strong way of speaking, or even softer, for having different kind of people. So what was it? There's a difference. And do you think that your kind of communication has changed the kind of communication of XR?
So sorry, again, Sarah.
Yeah, Tracy, no, talk to what happened on the road.
Sorry, did I understand your first question as being about the people on the road, darling?
Did you have a guidelines for activists speaking with the angry car drivers?
Okay, so sorry, I thought you meant like the de-escalators. That's completely different training. Yeah, like Sarah said, we talking to the public is completely different. That's de-escalation training, very much about just listening really, and then asking if you can speak. The spokes who were talking to media on the road had a very short briefing doc with the 5 key points for that day that they would see before they go out, and then would answer. Does that answer your question? Yeah. I can't answer about XR. Can you, Sarah?
So obviously, like, we've got really strong links into XR in the UK, and we they helped us out. If we needed any help, what influence, I mean, and I think Insulate Britain has had a tremendous impact on Extinction Rebellion. I mean, some people in XR hated it, absolutely hated it, and thought we were just beyond the pale. And yet other people came and joined, you know, or want to join the next iteration, or it's going to impact what happens in April when XR UK goes back onto the roads in April. It's going to have an impact on what those actions are. How it will impact the messaging, I think let's wait and see. It will be really interesting to see what that looks like and how it impacts the spokes. I think it would be, I think it has to have had an impact. But what it will be, I think it will play out in the early part of next year. So it'll be interesting to see what it is. Yeah.
To have one interviewer practically beg me to bugger off and get XR back on the streets. That was quite nice. I enjoyed that. XR had done so well. Same interviewer had been hammering XR 6 months before, so it will be really nice to see what happens when they're back. Bring them back.
Yeah, so does anyone have any last sort of final questions before we wrap up? Andy, go ahead.
It's really simple, but did you have to try to get onto those right-wing media shows, or was it just everything so transgressive that they called you up?
Yeah, I mean, the right-wing shows just loved us because they knew, like Tracy said, they knew they would get views and clicks and stuff. And interestingly, in the end, we basically just approached them as a kind of bit of training for us. It was like, you know, I've got GB News. Does anyone fancy doing it? Just because it was really quite good training for people. So yeah, they just wanted us on there.
They even offered to pay us, didn't they? At one point, we turned a couple down when we thought no, and let other people go in. We'll pay you.
That's right. I forgot about that. Yeah, when we did, there was a couple. We just went, no, we're not doing that. We just it was when there was a woman who drove a car. Some of the people on the road, and they wanted us to go on with her, and we just went, we're not getting into a situation with that woman, and. So we refused, yeah, and they started offering us money to turn up on their shows.
Yeah, so it might be good if you've got some friends from XR or a different group who do press work, if there's an interview ever comes up that you don't think is right for you to go into, it's nice to have friends. Donica went in and did that interview for us. Yeah.
And there was also...
So be prepared to get from the posher places. I probably practiced for more of them than I actually did. And that's, yeah, give your spokes a hug, because that was quite hard. Actually, you do all your practice and you get all ready and then there's no discharge. So yeah, that's normal, I think. Sarah.
There's also a couple of people in our media team used to so we would say when our spokes were going to be on shows on the chat, on the media chat, and people used to phone up the shows afterwards and go, no, I really agree with Insulate Britain. You know, I'm a mum from Shropshire, and I think they're doing the right thing. So actually, like, use those phone-ins as well and get supportive voices on them, because that people think the way that most people think, because it's really difficult to work out what you should do. And if you hear lots of people going, Insulate Britain are doing the right thing, going, oh, okay, well, maybe, and they sounded reasonable. So yeah, that's another tactic that you can use. And one thing I didn't mention was we actually also wrote out press releases for what to do if there was an injury on the road or a collision or something involving the actions. So we actually, because we knew we had to, and we knew that if we were pulling that press release together in that situation, that would just be beyond us, because we would just be like in pieces. So we actually thought what it was we would need to say in that situation. So that's another, it's really worth doing that. Like, what is the worst thing? Someone dies on the road. Okay, what are you going to say about it? How are you going to handle it? sorry, I'm going to end this on a low point now. Sorry about that, but it's really worth doing it so that you know. And it's the idea of I think it's called antimony, which is where there is no choice which avoids harm. Whatever choice you make, you know that harm is going to be committed to somebody. And so having that understanding that situation exists, and that, you know, enables us to, we actually wrote those press releases for the worst case scenario.
Practice.
Yeah, Connie, you gotta, sorry, go ahead. Connie,
Sorry,
go
just
ahead.
say it too. Yeah, it was horrible, but do it.
Yeah, hi, I just got a really short question. I'm working on this new team for international mobilization support with Roger. And I'm sure you could ask him, but as you've mentioned it before already, how quickly did you receive the 70% name recognition? Did you say 2 weeks? Okay, that's all I need to know. Thanks.
Yeah, but just one other thing I wanted to mention was, like, we were talking to this person in the CBC who's like a producer, and they're looking into sending a camera behind the scenes to film everything so that maybe they can put it together in a bigger video in the future. So that might be something worth pursuing too, is if you've gotten in with someone who's a producer and they can sort of do an exclusive, like giving people. Yeah, I saw the Guardian piece where there was a reporter embedded in the protests.
We did actually have a number of journalists who we would phone up on the evening before the action, and we would give them a telephone number of one person in the block team, and the block team had a burner phone, obviously, and the journalists would phone them, and they would tell the journalists where to meet them in the morning, and so they then came onto the road with the team, and that was how we got we got the coverage of the actions actually happening. So that's worth thinking about as well. And to begin with, it was really funny. To begin with, nobody wanted to go out with the teams. Like, everyone was just going, yeah, thanks, bye, yeah. And then the day after the first action, the press phone just went mad, and everyone was going, oh no, me, we want to be there. So then we had a real. It was quite difficult sometimes, like limiting the number of journalists going out, but that was good because it meant there was always really good coverage of the blocks happening.
Yeah, I think unless someone has a really quick final question, we're going to wrap it up here. Yeah, so the main takeaway, I guess, is that we're all going to have to become the most hated people in our countries going out of this training. So yeah, good luck to everyone who's involved in different projects globally. And I'll send the recording to the point persons for the individual projects.
Zane, I put my email up at the top here, slunnan@protonmail.com. So if any of you guys want sight of our briefing document and the messaging stuff that we use, obviously it will be different for your own countries, but you can see what we used.
That's good.
Yeah. And you have my email. Good luck to all of you. If anybody wants to talk, please do reach out. We really are building this big network all over the world of people mad enough to do this stuff, right? It's been a privilege to be here. Thanks.
Thanks, Tracy and Sarah.
Thank you all of you. Thank you.
Oh, see you go.
I know.